Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, Prime Minister's Question Special, where once again we go intrepidly in search of the answers that should come but possibly won't. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury. Are we anticipating a dearth of questions, avoidance again?
Well, it's been a tough week already, hasn't it, for the PM? He's faced his fair share of queues on Monday, and obviously Ollie, what's his name? I'm still troubled by that. I don't think if you're a sir, you can be Ollie. Um, did his thing yesterday. So I'm suggesting today that Kemi is not going to give the PM an easy ride. She hasn't for the last few. And we've got our bingo cards ready for 14 years. And she would have gone straight to war and backed Donald Trump. She's not fit to make a discussion. So we're all poised. Shall we run VT and see how it goes?
Yeah, let's see whether anybody disappoints.
Kemi Bear not the leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister stand by his statement at the dispatch box on the 10th of September last year that full due process was followed in the appointment of Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to Washington?
Yes, I do. Mr. Speaker, let me make clear at the outset that the appointment itself was a mistake. It was my mistake. I've apologised to the victims for it, and I do so again. What I set out to the House on Monday is that Foreign Office officials granted security clearance to Mandelson against the recommendation of UK security vetting. Yesterday, Sir Ollie Robbins was asked if he shared that decision with me, Number 10, or any other ministers. He gave a clear answer, no. Mr. Speaker, that puts to bed all the allegations levelled at me by those opposite in relation to dishonesty. Last week they were all saying that it must have been shared with me. Sir Ollie was very clear yesterday it was not. I believe not sharing it was a serious error of judgment. That information should have been shared with me and other ministers. And if it had have been, Mandelson would not have been committed to post.
Mr. Speaker, it does not put to bed anything. On the 11th of November 2024, long before any vetting had happened, the Prime Minister received advice from Simon Case, the then Cabinet Secretary. The advice said the appointment would require, and I quote, the necessary security clearances before confirming the Prime Minister's choice. This advice was ignored. So how can the Prime Minister still believe that confirming Mandelson before the security clearances was following full due process?
Mr. Speaker, this was looked into by Sir Chris Wormold. I asked him to review the appointment process, including the vetting. He confirmed, Mr. Speaker, his words, appropriate processes were followed. She's put great weight on the order of events. I remind her what Sir Chris said last November in evidence to the House. He said this, and I quote, when we are making appointments from outside the civil service, the normal thing is for security clearance to happen after appointment, but before the person signs a contract and takes up post. That is what happened in this case. Sir Ollie Robbins himself, Mr. Speaker, also gave evidence, and he said, and I quote, as is normally the case with external appointments in his department, the appointment was made subject to obtaining security clearance. Mr. Speaker, on top of that, Sir Ollie Robbins has made clear that the fact that developed vetting was after the announcement made, in his words, no material difference to the conclusion that was reached. And Mr. Speaker, I add this, that what Sir Ollie Robbins wrote to the committee yesterday was this, and I quote, when the Prime Minister informed the House that the proper process had been followed in respect of national security vetting, he was correct.
I'm going to pause there just in case anyone...
I think we should. I
So
think
are
we should
keeping
pause.
up?
I think we should celebrate. Well, no, because I think does he stand by his statement? Yes, I do. That is a question and an answer.
So we've actually got a tick for an answer.
Well, and actually, in terms of this exchange, for me, it is they are perfectly fair and reasonable questions to ask, and I think the Prime Minister is actually making a decent job of answering them. Which is that, and it gets into semantics. Always appropriate process or due process followed.
Mm-hmm.
If the we get down into the semantics and the weeds on this, don't we? About what happened when and who knew what.
We need a timeline.
And well, I think even with a timeline, Simon, there is a kind of what we know is that ultimately he didn't pass security clearance.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than that being the end of it, it would be in any other organisation. There was a sort of a workaround or a fudge or something. Somebody, it feels like somebody was lent on, but that's all supposition.
Mm.
I guess the we're almost losing the wood from the trees, aren't we? Because when you come up a level, when you actually come up a level, what was known was that he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He continued to be friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He'd been sacked from two high-profile posts previously, and he's known as the Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, you don't. You don't need a map to join those dots, do you? I guess a lot of it is easy in hindsight, but a lot of it is is labouring over the point of who knew what and when, and what
Yeah.
decision was made by when and by whom,
Yep.
and yeah, there's a lot of we followed the process. We followed the process. Well, hang on, don't we appear to have three different versions of what the process is? So, so firstly, that tells me that the process is pretty shit. If everybody's not, not mean unless everybody's following the same process, it's not a process. And what process of appointing a essentially our most important ambassador overseas? What process in appointing that role can't result in the Prime Minister being told, oh, by the way,
Yeah, and
it,
that's the bit that doesn't ring true, does it? Because and again, this is a balance of probability thing.
mm,
Do I think he was told? No, I don't. Do I think the shady character lurking in the shadows, Morgan McSweeney, knew? Yes, I think I do. I think he did know. And I think, I am seeing his grubby, greasy paw prints all over this in terms of, the wheels of government that turn behind closed doors. Um, and I think, you know, it was it an error of judgment to appoint Manderson? Yes. Was it an error of judgment to appoint Morgan McSweeney? Well, if my chief of staff, right hand man person didn't tell me something that would later come back as damaging and as obviously damaging as that, you know, then yes, I think it was an error of judgment. But where are you standing at the moment on it?
I just find that there's some of it that I find hard to 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 believe from a point of view of um, you're a lawyer. You're used to people lying to you or giving you half truths or trying to obfuscate the truth or
Mm,
the true kind of reason. I don't know, and I'll obviously never prove, but it kind of almost feels like somewhere along the line, the message got understood by the civil service. This is the appointment that number 10 wants, and we need to make it happen.
yep.
But that inferred instruction doesn't appear to have come from certainly doesn't appear to have come from Keir Starmer, doesn't appear to have come from the PM.
No.
Where that impression came from is not clear, but it sounds like, oh, we've got all of these concerns. Yeah, but we just need to do this. We just need to make this happen, guys. Just make it happen. And it almost kind of feels like that's what happened. Essentially, someone somewhere interpreted make this happen for me as ignore all of the red flags that you may see on the way. Just do it.
Who will rid me of this turbulent priest? Yeah, famous. You know.
So,
Didn't mean for you to run him through. Oh, sorry, Gov. I thought that's what you wanted. Right, should we listen some more?
Yes. Okay. Let's have some more.
It's very interesting that he mentions Chris Wormold. He is relying on advice given to him after Mandelson was sacked by a cabinet secretary the Prime Minister then sacked. That is not relevant. I'm talking about the advice he was given before the appointment. He keeps mentioning Sir Ollie Robbins. Sir Ollie Robbins told us that the Prime Minister even sought clearance from His Majesty the King before the vetting. He'd already got agreement from the US administration. The chair of the Select Committee said that. Mandelson was a done deal. Yesterday, Sir Ollie Robbins said that the focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. He said the Prime Minister's team showed a dismissive attitude to vetting, and they even argued Peter Mandelson didn't need any vetting at all. This clearly wasn't proper process. Why was due process not followed?
Mr. Speaker, let me deal with this directly, particularly this question of pressure in relation to the decision to appoint and to put into post Peter Mandelson. So Ollie Robbins could not have been clearer in his evidence yesterday. He said this: I didn't feel under pressure personally in terms of my judgment. His words. Mr. Speaker, he went on to say, I have complete confidence that recommendations to me and the discussions we had and the decision we made were rigorously independent of any pressure. Mr. Speaker, on top of that, he was asked if any conversations led him to believe that Mandelson needed to take up the role regardless of vetting outcome. He said, I can say with certainty it was never put to me in that way. No pressure existed whatsoever in relation to this case. What is unacceptable is that the recommendation of UKSV was not given to me before Mandelson took up his post.
Mr. Speaker, we all heard what Sir Ollie Robbins said yesterday. The fact of the matter is that the Prime Minister spent a lot of time telling us just how furious he was to learn that Mandelson failed the vetting, the same Prime Minister who was trying to get into Washington without any vetting at all. It's just unbelievable. The reason the Cabinet Secretary advised the Prime Minister to carry out full vetting before the appointment, this is common sense, Mr. Speaker, carry out full vetting before the appointment, was to protect our national security. The due diligence document said Mandelson remained on the board of the Kremlin-linked defense company Sistema long after Putin's first invasion of Ukraine in 2014. The Prime Minister told us on Monday that he'd read that due diligence report. Why did the Prime Minister want to make a man with links to the Kremlin our ambassador in Washington?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me deal with the first allegation she put in that question. It was always the case that would be developed vetting in this case. That was the understood process. That was carried out. It was reviewed by Sir Chris Wormold, and he said it was the appropriate process. Sir Ollie was absolutely clear that nobody put pressure on him to make this appointment, either, whatever the sequence, or developed a vetting. In relation to what was in the due process, any issues of national security are dealt with in the developed vetting process. I knew that. Peter Mandelson received clearance through that process. The problem was, as I said to the House, I was unaware that UKSV recommended against clearance. That is information that should have been brought to my attention. Mr. Speaker, they recommended with red flags that there shouldn't be clearance, and it was high concern. That information should have been made available to me at the time and subsequently. The fact that it wasn't was a very serious error of judgment.
Going to pause again there for a bit. We'll try and be brief on this one so that we can get through it. So it sounds like young Ollie isn't saying someone else told him to do all of these things. He's not saying
No.
I was pressured to do this. So either, well, it sounds then like he does that mean that he brought it upon himself to interpret it that way and carry it out that way?
Well, it sounds like he took a punt, doesn't he? And again, this is where it's almost like a courtroom drama, isn't it? You know, yeah, he read the due diligence
Some
document.
lawyers in Parliament.
Well, but I look at it, and he read the due diligence document. You know, you read. I'm sure he reads quite a lot. There's something in there that looks a bit iffy. And again, I can't believe I'm stood in front of Sir Keir. If you saw something that was a bit iffy, but you knew that that was going to go through a proper process of vetting with the special branch, you'd kind of trust that if that was a red flag, that it would be a red flag and you could trust the process to stop that happening. So at the moment, I after seeing Sir Keir pummeled to a ball of snot the last few weeks, I think he might be winning this one.
Okay. Interesting. I've heard a phrase used elsewhere, which is that all of the reasons that Madison was a good choice, in the sense that he exists in the fringes or the darkness, as it were, the Prince of Darkness, and that he has friendships or he's a bit of a Trump whisperer. All of those reasons are also all of the reasons why he's a bad choice.
Yeah.
And it seems like for whatever reason, someone somewhere took a punt on. We might as well see whether.
What
I mean, so this can bring this can. This can bring us a home run with Trump, but what the motivations for that were, whether they were.
I guess
it's honourable or not, or just helping your mate out. Who knows?
Well, I think we can use some cliches, can't we? Sometimes you need to set a thief to catch a thief, or a poacher turned gamekeeper. You can use those kind of cliches, but there is all an inherent risk that if you send somebody who you know to be a bad person, they might turn out to be a bad person. All things considered. Let's listen to some more.
Yes. Let's.
I don't know what planet the Prime Minister is on, Mr. Speaker. Appointing someone with known links to the Kremlin is not full due process. If anybody had brought that sort of name to me when I was a Secretary of State, I would have said, no way. The Prime Minister thought someone with Kremlin links was still probably okay. Let's do some vetting. Why does this matter? He keeps leaning on Sir Ollie Robbins, a man he sacked. He keeps leaning on him. Sir Ollie Robbins said yesterday that Peter Mandelson was given access to highly classified briefings even before he'd received clearance. That was a clear national security risk. How can the Prime Minister still maintain that full due process was followed?
Mr. Speaker, as a member of the House of Lords and Privy Councillor, and in accordance with guidance, documentation could have been provided to him and was provided to him. Strap material comes after developed vetting, but because he was a Privy Councillor, he could have access to other material before developed vetting.
This is a joke. He says a member of the House of Lords. Does he mean people like Matthew Doyle? Yeah. I'm amazed. Yes. I am amazed at the level of chuntering from Labour MPs. He promised them probity. What he's given them is cronyism and an old boys' club where Matthew Doyle is being proposed as an ambassador. Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Mr. Speaker, we all heard Sir Ollie Robbins' testimony yesterday. The head of the Foreign Office was sacked for the Prime Minister's own failings. His backbenchers know that is not fair. Even his most loyal cabinet members won't defend it. The Prime Minister did not follow the process the Cabinet Secretary set out in November 2024. He knows he did not follow due process, yet he told the House he had. Mr. Speaker, I cannot accuse the Prime Minister of deliberately misleading the House, but everyone can see what has happened here. This was not due process. Everyone knows the price of misleading the House. Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and go?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. Before Mandelson took up his post, UKSV recommended with red flags that clearance should be denied, and there was high concern that that was not brought to my attention or the attention of the Foreign Secretary at the time or subsequently is a very serious error of judgment, and anyone in my position would have lost confidence in the former Permanent Secretary. But, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition claimed on Friday that Mandelson could not have been cleared against security advice. She was wrong about that. She said that ministers must have been told. She was wrong about that. She claimed there was deliberate dishonesty. She was wrong about that. Wrong, wrong, wrong. She rushed to judgment as she always did, just like the Iran war. Mr. Speaker, I was elected by the British people because they let the country down for 14 long years.
Oh, no.
Whatever she says, whatever noise they make, nothing is going to distract me from delivering for our country.
Okay, so everyone
Oh,
else won't
no.
have heard,
No,
won't have heard you
no.
say, "Oh no, you were doing so well."
I genuinely, if any of our listeners think that I listen in advance and I know what's coming, I promise you I don't. He had done so well, and on the BS bingo, literally, I'm shouting house, aren't I?
Well, you've got at least got a line, haven't you? There's 14 years, and there's Iran.
14
So
years of Tory neglect, and just like she did in the she smells as well, and you're like, oh, you were doing so well. You actually looked like, for 1 week, just for about 10 minutes, you looked like a prime minister. You looked like you were competent. You looked like, here's the process, this is what happened, this is where it broke down, this is why I wasn't told, that's why I sacked the bloke. That's what anybody would have done. You looked like you knew what you were doing, and you degenerate into a name calling dick.
but that's certainly
In summary.
an interesting summary. I'm going to let you try and recover your, because at the moment we're treating our viewers to a fantastic shiny shot of your head.
Sorry, my head is in my hands. If you are listening along, my head is on my desk. My bald head is shining in the light. Oh, play some more VT while I just sit here and weep quietly.
Okay. I guess my kind of observations were the points before he tripped over and did that, and the points that he was nailing and making his point and driving it home in a very prosecutorial fashion, labeling that Kemi Badenoch had made some missteps on judgment. I agree with you. I don't feel that he needed to bring in kind of the Iran war. He just needed to give those examples of how she's been wrong on, how she's been wrong on this. But he made a point about not telling him was an error of judgment. But the question that I'm surprised no one was shouting out in the House was whose.
I mean, I think he made that very. I mean, for me, if you believe everything and there's not conspiracy around, Ollie Robbins either told no one or told his chief of staff. Yeah, Ollie Robbins has, for me, has ended up, probably having to take his ignominy and shame and his final salary pension and all of those things. So yes, yeah, that's kind of where I've got to. But we are. Let's move forward because we are. Yes. What we need is Ed Davey.
Try and breathe. Let's try and have a bit of Ed Davey.
Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself and my party with the comments of the Prime Minister on our wonderful late Queen? And can I also agree with him on the need to confront anti-Semitism wherever it is in our society, and also remembering Stephen Lawrence and his family? Mr. Speaker, I'm sure many of us in this House were shocked by the new revelations from Ollie Robbins yesterday. He said Number 10 told him to find a plum job for Matthew Doyle, another Labour crony friends with a convicted sex offender. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was asked on Monday whether Number 10 had proposed any political appointments other than Mandelson. Perhaps the last few hours have jogged his memory. Will he confirm today, did he know his office was lobbying for a diplomatic job for Matthew Doyle? And were they doing it on his authority?
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, Matthew Doyle worked for many years in public service, for me as Prime Minister and other ministers. When people leave roles in any organisation, there are very often conversations about other roles they may want to apply for. In this case, nothing came of it.
Sir Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, the House and the public watching will note the Prime Minister failed to answer my questions. But Mr. Speaker, the chaos in this government mustn't stop us from focusing on the cost of living crisis hitting our country. President Trump's idiotic war with Iran has already pushed up inflation in our country to 3.3%. And the Prime Minister knows there's far worse to come for the British people here on in. They need help now. So will the Prime Minister follow other countries and use the Treasury's extra revenues from higher fuel prices to cut rail and bus fares and slash prices at the pump by 12p a litre?
Mr. Speaker, everybody can see that the conflict is causing serious economic damage in this country and countries around the world. His claim of a windfall for the government are politically misleading and economically illiterate.
And at which point you didn't hear, but you could see Ed Davey saying, it's not. Yes, lots of other countries have taken the extra tax windfall from the increase in prices of fossil fuels to subsidise public transport.
Yeah, and you know, there is an element of, if you look at it, there will be windfall taxes. You know, if you look at the price of diesel, it's gone up sort of 50-60p. It's almost gone up by about 30%. So inflation will continue to rise, and you know, when prices rise, the government gets VAT on that. Their take will increase. How it chooses to spend that, obviously, is you know, as with all political debates, it's not. Everyone's got a list of things it should be spent on. I guess what started so brightly for Sir Keir in terms of actually answering the question, we haven't touched on Matthew Doyle, and neither do we have time to, but the question of, did your office lobby for a plum job and did you know about it? I thought the answer of, well, conversations happen about jobs that people might apply for. I think I'm taking that as a yeah, we did.
Someone mentioned it at some point, but nothing happened, mate.
Yeah. Oh, so in summary, it started so well. We actually had questions and answers. We had a Prime Minister who answered the questions prime ministerially and for once had Kemi on the back foot. And then all of a sudden it degenerated into poo stink, you smell, not answering the question, Yabu sucks, blah, 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 blah. And we ended up back where we were. It's been like a game of snakes and ladders, this one, hasn't it?
I mean, a little bit. I don't think if you compared this week and last week side by side.
Oh, it got much better. Much better.
But, you know, much more of a grown-up adult conversation, an actual serious response to a serious issue, instead of all of this kind of point scoring. To me, the kind of observation that I'm left with is, look, obviously Starmer's background is in the legal profession. Then I don't know. Stop trying to be something you're not, which is this point scoring engine against Kemi Badenoch. You're not going to out Kemi.
No.
If anything, your strength is proving that that's just kind of petulant, childish playground politics of point scoring and and name calling. You if anything, you want to not let that land and be the grown up in the room. So maybe a bit more of that. Maybe someone should write on a napkin, "Let Starmer be Starmer." But I also don't think that the kind of close out on the kind of, he pretty much kicked the door shut on Ed Davey there. And and I don't see that there was really kind of any need to do that. What was I don't quite get it. It was almost like, oh, I'm sick of dealing with this.
Well, for me, I think Ed Davey had, in terms of, we talk about sometimes landing blows, I think Ed Davey had punched him squarely in the face with that question. It was a question that couldn't be answered in a way that wasn't either, you either ignored it. I think if you answered it on the balance of probability, to use the legal term, I think his answer was, yes, we did try and sort him out with a plum job, but we never quite got round to it. So that's my conclusion. And so once again, we have wrestled and wrangled. We've gone slightly over time.
Mm-hmm.
You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast, PMQ special. We've got a couple of weeks off from PMQs, but we are husting like mad on Sunday. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. Please do give us a like, follow, give us some comments, give us a subscribe. Let us know what you're thinking, and we'll see you next. We'll see you next time. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.